Hi everyone, good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on when you're watching this video. My tag is Akashic, and I'm here to you today to present ZeroRanger Vulcan only high score showcase that I'm submitting to SGDQ. So this game has been a passion project of mine for 6 years, this category in particular. It is a very high risk, originally a survival category that's now been turned into a high score showcase thanks to the help of the community. And before we get started, the game is very, very dense. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to cover in the stages. So I'm actually going to explain some mechanics real quickly first before we hop right into it. So first off, ZeroRanger is a shmup, arcade shooter. And instead of having like a bomb system to use to clear bullets off the screen, the game instead gives you access to power-ups that are used to like shoot behind you, shoot to your sides. You get a charge beam that absorbs fire like a shield. You get a lock-on that helps you keep multiplier. You get 2 melee weapons. We have none of that. Today, it's just one tiny little Vulcan pea shooter versus the world. We got one guy versus 2,100 enemies that are here to just make our life miserable. First thing I want to go over before we start the run is multiplier. That's kind of the lifeblood of the score run. And if you're at home and you've never watched a run of this game before, that's kind of what I want to draw your attention to the most. You're going to see in the top right corner of the screen once we start the game that there is a multiplier meter. When you defeat an enemy, it's going to increment based a certain amount based on whatever you're killing. And after you defeat something and it fills up, it drains really fast. And when it drains, it immediately cuts into half. The only way to stop that is to chain enemy kills together or continuing to deal damage to enemies. With Vulcan, we don't have a whole lot of good ways to do that throughout the run. So that's where all the high-tech skill comes in. There's going to be a lot of precise movement and a lot of really quick thinking and really cool strats to try to keep that multiplier as high as we can at all times. I'm going to explain it a little more later, but I just want to know that if you want to see how good the run is doing, look at the top right corner of the screen. If it says 6.4, we're doing great. All right, so as for Vulcan only itself, to my knowledge, only 3 players have ever completed this category. It's myself, 1 player who did it in the first year, and a Japanese player. And this video today is a world record presented after a no reset 1-1. I wanted to do a video that kind of emulated marathon settings a little bit. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So right off the bat here, we're going to collect our first bonus of the run, and I'm going to explain those in a minute, but I already want to let you know that as the run starts, there's already going to be a difficult trick coming up here. We're going to try to position this enemy kill in a certain way to blow it up with an overkill and grab all 4 rings, just like that. So to explain kind of what goes behind that, one of the biggest things we're going to be doing while maintaining multiplier, like we've talked about, as you can see in the top right corner, is we're going to be collecting bonuses throughout the stages. These all have special requirements. There's 3 per stage, and they will all increment 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000 points apiece. The other thing we're going to be doing, and the thing that's going to interact most with our multiplier, is going to be enemy overkills. So as you can see, when you destroy a bigger ship, if you keep firing on it after it's been defeated, it will blow up a second time just like that. You'll be rewarded the exact amount of points you were given when you first defeated that ship. But the problem is going for overkills does not refresh your multiplier at all, so there's kind of a balance for going for it. Right here already, we're getting into our first mini-boss of the run, Artypo. So Artypo has this shield that kind of deflects your fire and prevents you from building multiplier against it. We're actually going to sit here and farm it a little bit for these missiles that come out for extra points. And then it's going to start firing these bonus rings. We're going to manipulate it into the corner to fly through 4 of these before we defeat him, and that's going to drop the second bonus of the stage. We immediately head into the first boss fight of the run, which we first need to defeat these 4 ships that come flying in. We want to try to get 3 overkills here because they're worth a lot of points. By defeating those, that spawns that gold bonus ship, and that gives us our first bonus. And immediately with bosses, we're going to go for speed kills. We're going to get in their face, we're going to kill them quickly. We get so much more points for killing them fast than we do farming them for any of their destroyable projectiles. So stage 1's real quick, but now these are our power-ups. We're not collecting any of these. We will be collecting 1, but not be using it, and I'll explain that at the moment. But we're going to quickly destroy them, and that increases our rank. This game has a dynamic difficulty system, and as you play through the game and do better, the game gets harder to match, so you can never really rest easy on a high score run. So stage 2 is a lot different than stage 1. You'll notice every stage in this game has its own kind of theme, and they're all very, very different. Stage 2 is more of a closed box. You have this like maze-like setting, you have walls, and a lot of interesting wall mechanics too. When you're leaning up against a wall, you'll see your multiplier will drain faster than normal. You'll see the number shake in the top right corner of the screen. So it's really difficult with Vulcan because now the game is expecting us to have either a back shot or a side shot to hold multiplier. So as you're already seeing, we have to do a lot of interesting flying, delaying enemy kills, and just really good premonition on like where enemies are going to come from in order to hold our multiplier as well as we have so far. So this section's pretty tight here, and as you can see there's a lot of block boxes and they can really get in your way or mess up your flying. Here we're going to extend multiplier by breaking these boxes, timing this enemy kill, and grabbing that box real quick before moving on. And then here, despite the fact that we don't have the back shot, if we lean up against this wall, we can get both these kills and we can still get the overkill. Now this extend is pretty difficult. We need to break these boxes and kill these Flydoos in an exact sequence in order to have enough time to get back up here and still hold on to the multiplier. Then we need to bait these ships down just like that. Grab those real quick and then fly all the way back up here to keep the multiplier fresh. We have to kill these enemies pretty slowly. I believe I messed this up a little here. I killed them a little too fast, but fortunately I don't lose my entire multiplier. I only lost half of it, so we still maintain quite a bit of score going into this section of boxes. But this would be the first big point loss of the run. We want to delay the kill on this final box just a little bit, so that we can chain it together with the drills. And as you're already noticing, if I haven't shut up yet, it's because holding multiplier is a full-time job, especially in Vulcan where we don't have a lot of the auxiliary tools that make it really, really easy. We have to work really hard and think 24/7 about how to keep the multiplier up. Now we're going to get into one of the most infamous mini-bosses in the game, Artypo. He has a shield that deflects all fire from the front, which is terrible for us who only have a Vulcan shot. You can go behind him and shoot him in the back, or you can shoot him from the sides, but we just kind of have to deal with hitting his shield and hoping he doesn't do that too much. But quick fight, not too bad. We would like to not see him use that attack, but again, there isn't really a time element unless we're on big bosses, so as long as we don't get hit and we maintain our multi, we're good. So right here, this is known as a crab corridor. This is a very, very heavy point section. You want to try to keep multi as best we can here. Vulcan has a hard time killing this guy, and unfortunately we do bump into him, but we do end up with a pretty decent multiplier going into the rest of the hallway. But here we need to set this up where we grab that bonus. We need to do our first tap fire setup there. That way we have enough time to start chaining kills together here. We want to grab these overkills as much as possible, and then this is our first major trick of the run right here. We need to delay that kill, get under this guy barely, and then tap fire over here and delay the kill on these two as long as we can to hold multiplier, then quickly chain it into this mech. And that's perfect. We got all of our overkills too, so we got a lot of points for that. Now, quickly to explain something I haven't gotten to yet, anytime you see gold ships, those are what's known as bonus ships. Those spawn due to different criteria. A lot of that criteria is pretty self-evident if you've ever played any shmup, so I'm not going to go too deeply into what causes most of them to spawn. So this is our second boss, Second Apocalypse. His firing pattern is actually really deterministic. He always fires 1, then 2, then 3, and they always kind of pattern the same way, so it's really easy to manipulate him. We want to destroy these sides first because they give you a lot of score. And then we want to really try to center fire and weave as much as possible on this boss here. For the quick kill, we want to make sure that when we move forward out of that bullet pattern, we're actually hitting him to get the Doppler. And that's him. Very quick second boss. We're going to destroy the most useful power-ups in the game. This is Lock On and Charge Shot. Lock On restores your multiplier when you lock onto something and when you defeat something with it. It's considered one of the best ways to hold multiplier in the game. It can also target enemies in the background, which you're about to see is very relevant. And I have no way to do that. So stage 3, this is definitely one of the stages which is the most difficult for Vulcan. It has the lowest score threshold currently. We're going to open up the Skull Taxi here. For Skull Taxis, you want to pop them open. And when you do that, they will fire a set amount of projectiles, and you want to try to break as many of them as you can. That's where all the points come from. And they fire more the lower health they are. So Skull Taxis are kind of the biggest source of variance you're going to see in high-level ZeroRanger play. We're going to get all these juicy bonus ships, and then we're going to go into Squid. So we really want to break these turrets on Squids because they give us extra points. See, we're going to kill that first and grab the bonus on the island. That allows us to extend the multi onto this screen. Going to kill that one first. That's going to cause those enemies to spawn in the background, but the rest of this section is actually on a timer outside of those background enemies. So we're trying to delay the kills in such a way where everything nicely chains together. Here we're going to tap fire and try to hold multi. I failed to do it because of how I had to dodge, but by using tap fire, I'm able to maintain at least a 3.3, which is still better than the game's kind of expecting you to kill that. And without lock-on, you're expected to kind of drop all the way back down to 1 while you wait for these ships to come in. So that's a very recent trick that's been added to the run. We're not supposed to really be able to kill all these Knightships with Vulcan, but with really precise movement, we can. The game really expects you to lock on or use the back shot to get them all. But we're able to get them all with Vulcan with really precise movement, and that's how we get that bonus from the ship that spawned right before the plane fight. So our next bonus of the stage is going to be on Snake. We need to defeat all the sections and then defeat the Snake. You can actually defeat the Snake, and while it's dying, defeat a final section, and that will also get you the spawn. We unfortunately end up losing Multiplier here because this section just I kind of miss it, and I thought it was going to blow up. But we still get a 2.3, which is not terrible. It's better than going all the way down to 1. This game definitely rewards you for almost. If you can almost hit some of these harder strats, you can still maintain some of your multiplier, and you don't lose as much score. So trains are probably one of the most dense and difficult screens for Vulcan only. I'm going to go ahead and spoil it now. There's 2 loops to this game, and we're going to see this screen again. The first loop of trains is pretty straightforward. You definitely want to stay on the right side and completely clear this train out. As you can see, it's going to get very dense here in a second with lasers that target you and some other stuff. But if we stay on top of it and stay super aggressive, everything should get shut down pretty easily. And this was a very good train. I got a lot of score here. This is Tank. If we break all his legs, he drops a 1-up. It's really difficult to do this and maintain multi if you don't get good luck or you accidentally miss a leg like this. Unfortunately, I believe in the attempt of holding multi, I try to go too close to the center. I end up taking a hit. And right there, that's something I want to talk about. In this game, if you haven't noticed, when you take a hit, you don't respawn like in other shmups. You don't like go off screen and reappear. You get knocked back a set amount, given a little bit of iframes, and then you kind of have to navigate getting back to where you need to get back to on your own. And it's really easy to end up just right back on top of another bullet and the chain hits together. The game has a lot of almost like tech chase mechanics, like a fighting game. You have to be really careful about it. So for Grapefruit 1, we need to break these pylons. That's what exposes Grapefruit. Unfortunately, this goes a little sideways because I don't grab that pylon kill right there a few moments ago, so I end up getting a few extra cycles, but we get through it pretty clean. Really dicey, but as long as we don't take a hit here, that's okay. We lost a bit of time bonus, but taking a hit is a 1,000-point loss at the end of the stage. Losing a second is a 100-point loss on time bonus, so better to hold on to the life just in case. So here, you saw we collected a power-up. We got this sword. We got this whole mech transformation going on. You're not going to see this. We're never going to use this, except in one place, but we're not actually going to use the sword at all. We're just going to transform. We need it to progress the game later, so we have to collect it. So you can watch the really cool power-up sequence because that's the only time you're really going to see it. So stage 3 has 2 bosses. We're heading into the second one, which is called Big Zan, and it has this whole caravan sequence first, where we have to fight these little Zankies, they're called. They have these shields that activate when they take damage, and what you're supposed to do is with the mech, you're able to have a melee attack that kind of just breaks them instantly. And also, this is where scoring gets a lot different for Vulcan compared to other categories, because now we're supposed to have access to a mechanic called Overload. When you deal damage to a boss during boss break, or during otherwise you kill enemies with your sword, you will increase the multiplier past 6.4 and enter a state of overload up to 12.8. But it becomes a lot tighter to keep the multiplier. With Vulcan only, we can never get up to past 6.4. So the score potential starts to really drop for us here, and we have to start getting really creative to try to maintain a good scoring for this route. But right here, we're going to get to Big Zan. This is a part that is usually milked In typical play, what you're going to do normally is you take the melee weapon to destroy all these eyes, and you're going to keep those 2 turrets that are spawning those diamond bullets alive, and those give you a lot of points to just, you know, break them at 12.8 multiplier the whole time. With Vulcan, we don't have as many options to do that, especially with Type B. It's too easy to damage these things and destroy them, so right now I've been settling for killing these eyes, getting as many of those little things as I can, and then killing Zan without taking a hit. Still wielding me a good amount of points compared to just quick killing Zan. I still think I gained like 10,000 from all that. Now we're heading into the most interesting stage of the game, stage 1-4. This is the highest action stage of the run. I'm really excited to share this in a marathon, but it also has the highest potential for score loss. So yeah. This first screen here, we're going to be defeating these ships, but they're actually going to turn around and start coming from behind. They really want you to start using your melee and your other options to defend yourself from different angles on this stage. And with only Vulcan, we can't be doing that. So we just kind of have to navigate them trying to hit us, and we'll get out of that safely. I haven't had the chance to explain bumping yet, and I wanted to explain that earlier. So as you noticed, I've taken hits from ships and have not taken damage. I've instead bounced off of them. So the way this game works is that if something is coated in orange like that, you'll take damage when it hits you, or if it's a bullet. But if you just get hit by something that is like just a ship that is there, not coated in orange, you'll bump off them. And when you bump off them, you can bump 3 times in quick succession before you take damage. And bumping is pretty useful because 1, it prevents you from taking damage. 2, it breaks, it destroys lesser health enemy ships. And 3, it just allows for some cool tech, some good movement in different parts of the run. So for Vulcan here, all we can do is destroy these Zans as quickly as we can and get these 2 things. You saw that I pulled back in order to hold Multiplier by defeating that side piece. Keeping that Multiplier into this section, this is a very high scoring section. We call this Buddha heads, and they're not going to look like Buddha heads, but there's a long community story behind that. Not really going to get too deep into, but they are affectionately known as Buddha heads. But by keeping the Multiplier, we can get a lot of points off these guys. See, breaking it was worth 512. Doing it again, and then you can get overkills on them as well. That's worth a lot. Now, this section, these are all bonus Buddha heads, and this is a time section, so you can try to get as many as you can. So by holding Multiplier, getting into this section, and staying in control of it, you get a lot of the points in 1-4 right here. But it also starts to get really, really dangerous really fast, because these guys alternate between firing homing bullets or firing bullets from their positions that always rotate like that. And when they start also trying to dive into you, it gets really messy really fast. But overall, pretty solid Buddha heads. So we have this approach section. This is supposed to be the big, oh, you have melee, like you can tear through all this and get an easy 12.8 multiplier. Like this is supposed to be a really easy part of the game for score. Like everything about 1-4 is supposed to make you feel really powerful because you have this sword and it trivializes everything. And as you can tell, nothing here has been trivial. So we have to be careful and destroy these without getting hit by those. And then we have this little mini boss here. This isn't too bad. Usually, if you're like in a full run, you have like an auto lock on and you could just focus on dodging. But Vulcan still needs to keep a line of fire on the small hitbox, but it's not too terrible. So now we're actually at the real beginning of stage 4. This is the second half of the stage. This is where the most points are. It's also the most difficult for Vulcan to keep a multiplier. It also has some areas of RNG. So we're going to try to maintain our multiplier by defeating these squids and going right into these mechs. Then there's a lot of different ways to do this. Trying to optimize as many kills as we can. I didn't get too many, but as long as we kept multiplier, that's what was important, but we do drop it here. Now, this is the first damage source I end up taking in hallway. I get a pretty bad spread on those balls there, unfortunately, and we have to try to move on, try to get our multiplier back. This is a great screen to build your multiplier back up on. And then we have more skull taxis. However, we're on a timer, and there's a bonus. All 3 bonuses are on this screen, so we want to kill these skull taxis as fast as we can with Vulcan, because we don't have a lot of time. And unfortunately, I get a really rare full left spawn there, which unfortunately prevented me from getting all the bonus, and also dropped the multiplier. I believe this ended up being the biggest score loss of the run. Had that not spawned all the way to the left, I could have gotten another wave of ships that were worth about 10,000 points, and I would have gotten a third bonus here, which is worth 4,000, so... But We have a good life count. Alive is good, and we're heading into one of the most complex screens of the game in the maze. There's a lot of different ways you can go through this screen, and it's kind of designed that there's routes that you can only take, like that door, you can only open that up if you have like side shot. There's some you can only open up with back shot, and there's a lot of different options you have to try to get through it. For Vulcan, since we can only fire in front of us, we have to route our own way through this maze safely, because there's a lot of sections that if you try to go through a Vulcan, you'll just hit a dead end and you're gonna squish up against the wall. Holding Multiplier here is also pretty tricky. We gotta use slow there to break that enemy and try not to get hit. Oh, unfortunately, we're gonna take this hit here, trying to get to this guy. But we're gonna grab these enemies and pick our Multiplier back up pretty quickly. The second part of the maze is kind of a freestyle. There's a lot of RNG with these enemies we call Flydoos that are gonna fly in, and between that and this eye that homes around and fires these lasers, the screen is very, very dangerous. Honestly, I'm usually just happy if I make it through alive. See, even with the constant fire, we couldn't prevent the Flydoos from comboing us into the bottom of the screen there. So, very difficult to hold Multiplier, but there is a lot of score here if you end up getting a really good pattern and you react well to it. So that's the end of the stage part of 1-4. Now we're going to enter stage 1-4's first boss. There's actually 5 bosses in this stage. It is very, very dense, and it's definitely the coolest part of the run. I'm really looking forward to this later. But right now we have this approach where there's no score to be gained. We're just trying to defend ourselves because these orbs are going to start moving and start trying to shoot us with projectiles. This is kind of the first big break of the run. Like, this is one of the few moments of peace we do have. This guy is going to try to shoot those. This part can be a little complicated with Vulcan. It's really nice to have melee to break these instantly, but we don't. Also, what I'm going to do here, there's a little Easter egg. I'm going to explain this because I didn't realize it was in the submission video. There's an Easter egg to replace the OST here with an old one from an older version of the game. So Orbs Spewer, this boss is really difficult with just Vulcan. It's not difficult to stay alive, but it's very difficult to defeat it quickly. As you can see, it's really hard to maintain a lot of fire on these orbs. All of Orb Spewer's orbs do bump damage, so the point of this boss is trying to play bumper cars with you. It's trying to make you take 3 hits of bump damage instead of hitting you with any bullets. But that means you can get pretty creative and pretty aggressive about how you want to damage him, because just bouncing off of the orb is not, you know, a loss of a life. For these attacks, you want to try to get under them and just get to lay on the fire. This section is pretty chaotic, and if you want to know, I am just reacting to how it's coming out. It's pretty hard to learn how to do this at first, but it's really rewarding once you figure it out. Very surprised I recovered from that raw hit, to be honest. Usually getting hit there at all means you get hit multiple times, so pretty happy with that Orb Spewer. So now we're heading into boss rush. I do take a moment to breathe here. I can scroll the text faster if I want to, but I took a moment to breathe because 4 lives is... it's okay. I wasn't expecting this run to be that very good at this point. There's been a low-scoring Loop 1 simply because of 1-4, but with 4 lives and every boss in Boss Rush dropping a life, I figured I had a good way to build my life stock back up to try to make up points in the second half. Because this was a no-reset attempt. So right away, we're heading into Brain first, which is usually what I don't want to see because this is one of the most difficult milks of the run. Generally speaking, to defeat Brain, we just damage the Brain and we ignore everything else. But as you can see, every time you break up a different part of like Brain's turrets and stuff, you get points for it. And the more you defeat them quickly without damaging the Brain, the more chances you get to destroy these segments. But the more you destroy these segments, the more they rank up and become more dangerous and difficult to avoid. And at the very end, it gets very dangerous very fast. It's one of the most chaotic sections for Vulcan. Without any way to deflect bullets, destroy them, absorb them, or like target indirectly with lock-on, having to move under and destroy everything by hand is very dangerous, especially in a situation like this. So this is where Brilk, we call it Brilk, brain milk. And while that is a very unappealing term, this is one of the most important tricks of 1-4. It gives you a lot of score. So as you can see here, I try to clear one side because the screen won't progress and spawn more things on both sides until like you clear a certain amount of things on both. So by destroying one side versus the other, I can kind of keep it a bit more controlled. But obviously this section has a lot of RNG, so taking 2 hits is honestly like within what I would take in a run. Like even my best runs generally just take 2 hits there, so take 2, get 1 back, and we got a lot of points off of it, so that's pretty good. Next we're heading into Salamander. So Salamander is kind of like simultaneously a difficult but really chill fight because there's no extraneous time requirements. You just get 5,000 points for defeating him. As you notice, there's no timer in this part because we already received 1 force time bonus when defeating Orbs. So all we need to do is take our time, try to be safe, and damage Salamander up into phase 2. Although, as you can tell, I was a little aggressive there. I like to always be aggressive on this boss. It's kind of a community thing. We call it For the Fans, where I just stay at the bottom, but I decided to play it a little safe. This section can get dicey because the scroll speed keeps speeding up. See, I barely avoided the hit there. The fireballs at their base are the hitbox, not the fire above them. So I was able to get really close to that fireball and get out of that situation. Next, we're heading into the fun part of the boss rush. This is less of a boss and more of a scoring section. It's called Space Invaders. Very aptly named. You need to defend Earth from these little shrimp guys. After a while, they'll just randomly decide to collide with Earth. There's a lot of RNG on how they do that, and that can be pretty difficult. If you destroy these bonus ships, though, you'll get a lot more points for them blowing up the shrimp. So your goal is to try to get as many shrimp destroyed with a UFO as you can. This is pretty good. This is not perfect, but it's really solid. You also gain points from hugging the bottom of the screen. You kind of get like cheered on by the residents of Earth for doing well, and so they give you a lot of points per second. So anytime I can, you can see I hug the bottom of the screen for a lot of different points here. There's this final section, and for every section of Earth that is remaining, in this case we save the Earth, every section of Earth remains, we get a lot of points. So while that 1-4 had a pretty rough start and a pretty bad maze, it had a really good boss rush. We got a lot of points on Brilk, and we got a lot of points on Space Invaders. And now we're heading into our 4th boss that doesn't give us any score. This is Skeleton. Just like Sans and Undertale, you don't actually want to fight this guy, but it will be a donation incentive. So if you want to see that fight, it's exactly like fighting Sans and Undertale, but in a shmup. Get donations, and it'd be super fun. So overall, pretty disappointing end to Loop 1, but we exited with a lot of lives. And with those lives, it's 1,000 per life at the end of the stage. There was a lot of room to gain score back. Now we're in Loop 2. What's really important about Loop 2 is that the enemies are a lot more aggressive, there's usually more of them, and every random popcorn that fires something will usually fire 2 more bullets. So we're trying to do the same opening we did a little bit at the start, but we have to account for those missile guys. And then the rest of it is just kind of try to kill everything we can and be really careful about getting hit. As you can see, there's a lot of threats coming from the bottom of the screen. These stages are really designed around you having options like the sword or lock-on or charge and to be using them to the best of their ability. So holding Multiplier in Loop 2 stages with just Vulcan is a lot of work. You see there's a lot of enemy bullets. And remember, in this game, these are not scripted bullets. They are scripted in terms of you kind of know who's going to fire, but they're always firing on your position. It's not like, oh, there's a safe zone here or I can hug this wall here. Like, no, this game you constantly have to react. We're constantly baiting the bullets around. So, heading into Arc Adder a second time, it's the same fight, but he has a much bigger shield. He also fires a lot more bullets. These patterns are really aggressive. You see this time I damage him down as fast as possible. That lets him fire off the rings early. We have to go through more rings this time, and I don't like spending too much time on this fight, so I want to grab the rings, defeat him as quickly as possible, and hold on to my multiplier. And then it's going to be the same thing as in stage 1. We want to get these bonus ships to grab our 3rd bonus of the stage. And then we fight Skulltastrophe. Now, he's a harder version of the first boss, but the quick kill for this section is pretty much the same, so it goes just about as well. I get bumped here, and I have to be really careful and back off, but overall, it goes just about as well as we want it to. Could have gained a couple seconds, but no big deal. And that's that. A perfect 2-1. No complaints. We got a perfect stage. We held Multiplier the whole way despite the danger. We defeated Skulltastrophe pretty quickly. Nothing can go wrong, right? So every Loop 2 boss has either a second phase or a different form. This is Skulltastrophe 2. This is actually a scoring segment. You want to break as many of these orbs as you can without defeating him and farm him for these missiles. And you do want to hit him occasionally to try to build up your multiplier. So Vulcan has a really hard time, like we saw with Zan, doing stuff like this without damaging the boss. So there's a very particular way we go about this. You're going to see a lot of tap firing. This was the best Skulltastrophe milk that's ever been done in the Vulcan run. It ends up making about 18k points, and we get through without getting hit. It's very nice. I'm very proud of this one. And then here, this is the natural end of being able to milk this boss. Once he fires that last set of missiles, he won't fire anymore, so that's the perfect time to defeat him. So for how good that stage was... So remember, overload means I can get a 12.8 multiplier. Without the ability to get a 12.8 multiplier, with only 6.4 and half the threshold, had I had max lives, I would have still gotten the Z rank on that stage, which is something that's really cool. Loop 2's been optimized a lot in Vulcan. This is probably the hardest opening in the game here for Vulcan. This entire segment and holding multiplier through it is very, very complicated. We want to grab those rings. It's going to be the same as it was in the first loop, but there's just a lot more things that can go wrong. These things fire at you. You need to get to them quickly. We've got more projectiles, more danger, tighter windows. We get that overkill. We need to delay this enemy kill to get this chain right here. As you can see, there's just a lot more danger in general. These stages are a lot more intense in Loop 2. There's just a lot more action. Now here we're going to see a pretty significant change. Instead of that box that had projectiles in it, we're going to break it open to save our little bunny here. We love her. She's my favorite. Grabbing these hearts keeps your multiplier refreshed, so it's kind of the same deal as it was in the first loop, but instead we get to extend off the bunny, which is really helpful. This part's the same as it was in Loop 1. There's just a lot more bullets, and unfortunately because of that, trying to kite the ship low and defeat it, I end up getting hit by that stray bullet from the Squid itself. Unfortunate. See, instead of but now there's no bonus here. That bonus is going to appear later. But we get the same chain, and we get to head into boxes with a decent multiplier. Again, we're going to want to delay this kill right here to keep our multiplier up. But as you can see in this section, instead of having breakable boxes on the left for bonus, we have these in the way, so we have to be really careful about how we do this. Break open a section at the bottom to go in and out of. Unfortunately, a glitch there known as, not a glitch, but more of an interaction known as glue fighter happens there. Sometimes if you get caught in the corner of boxes, no matter which of the 4 directions you move in, you will not get removed from it. Not too common. Unfortunately, as you saw the ship spun, I was trying to do a lot of different ways to get out of it. So this is Artypo 2. So if you didn't notice the first time, that shield that absorbs bullets does fire a revenge pattern if you fire too much at it. On Artypo 2, it's a lot more sensitive and it's a lot bigger, so we can't really damage Artypo as much during this part of the fight. We gotta focus on dodging and then get around and damage him after the shield goes out. Unfortunately, in trying to kill him quickly, I take a trade right there. But 5 lives at this point is still very solid. We're still in a very good spot. The rest of the stage has had a really good score. So Crab Hallway 2, to see that the bonus from before was moved over here, we want to pick that up. The boxes are in different positions, but the idea is the same. We want to get to the bottom. We want to defeat these crabs as quickly as we can. Try to hold multiplier off of them. And then we're going to break this wall of bullets, follow it up. Defeat this guy, grab that box real quick to hold multiplier, then we're going to tap fire to hold it, and then do this section. And this is really nice. We get a lot of points here for having 6.4. Same strat as before, we're going to break that and get under here. Unfortunately, he bumps me out, but we still managed to kill him in time to keep a 3.6 multiplier instead of letting it drain down to 0. And then we attack this mech, extend here. Then we defeat these bonus ships as they fly in. And we're on to the second boss of Loop 2. Same open, we have these mechs we want to kill. They're just worth a lot of points. They're also pretty dangerous if they can fire. Again, we're going to be really aggressive about destroying these segments so that they don't get to fire too much and we get a lot of points off of them. This boss is very similar to its first round. It only really changes once the turrets are destroyed. But now, his bullets are really fast. but they follow the same pattern, so if you know what you're doing, it's not too difficult. So yeah, they don't try to fake you out this time. There's definitely a second fight, and you know there's a second fight coming up. And this one is really interesting. So Onion is something that is very low on the screen, if you've noticed. He's kind of under the halfway mark. For Vulcan, that's really dangerous. Like, this fight is meant to be fought pretty much exclusively with like back shot or using side shot on his hands or using lock on. We have to follow a very specific pattern to get him to behave exactly how we want to, or else this fight gets really dangerous and takes a long time. But by breaking those hands right there, unfortunately we take a hit because the hand reached down and grabbed us. But by breaking a hand while it's the only thing he's holding on to, he'll drop the final bonus of the stage. And it also skips whatever attack he's on, which we use to get to a safe pattern that allows us to play the rest of the fight down here. And make really quick work of him. I can't stress enough that if that strat was messed up or we got off cycle, that we would lose another 40 seconds fighting him, and that's 4,000 points we don't want to lose. So, very clean Onion. Hopefully should go that way absolutely every time. As you notice, we're breaking the power-up orbs again. They show up again in loop 2. It allows you to change your power-up if you're playing casually or you're playing a full score run. But here, we just break them, get the rank back up, and go right into 2-3. So we're heading very close to the end of the run. This is kind of the final stretch. As you can tell, it's the same opening from 4, but it's a lot more difficult. These Skull Taxis are a lot more aggressive with their fire. You're going to see they kind of fire an entire wall at us. Got to be really conscious about your positioning beforehand. And this time we get all 3 of them. Really good. Get the overkill as well. See these puddles? We need to break those because there's an optional boss fight against a crab instead of snake, and that gives you a lot more points, so we want it. Now for squids, they're going to be a little different here. When you break their turrets, they enter kind of a second phase. And you want to delay killing them so that they actually enter it, because if you put too much damage on them, they'll blow up right away, like you're going to see with this left one here. But by breaking him open, you get a second phase that stalls a lot more time and also gives you more points for defeating them, so it's super worth it. Here we're going to try the same extend we did in loop 1. It's a little easier because he goes into this phase, however, like, it's still very tight, and with how late it took me to get onto that center, I had to settle for going for a partial extend here. But still a full partial extend, only dropped down to 3.2. Now, about Knightships, remember how I mentioned earlier this wasn't really meant for Vulcan? This pattern right here prevents you from actually getting all of them. I've theorized that maybe I'd be able to, like, take damage and do what's called a rocket jump, which is kind of like a fighting game tech to get over there, but so far, no luck with that. So, for now, we defeat Plane with 6.4 multiplier, we take this scripted drop right here, and then we head into Crab. So Crab is really interesting because Onion was at the halfway screen mark. Crab is at the very bottom of the screen. We cannot go down there and damage him with Vulcan in any way, so instead we need to fire these bombs back at him very carefully, because if we break them, they're going to explode in our face. And we also want to defeat as many of these UFOs rings as we can, because they give us multiplier. And multiplier matters on Crab a lot. He drops a lot of points when you defeat him. So unfortunately, those bubbles can bump you, and we do end up taking some damage on the way over there, but we still end up keeping a modest amount of multiplier defeating Crab. This fight can go way worse. I'm pretty happy with it. Crab was only very recently implemented in Vulcan. Like 2 world records ago, we weren't fighting Crab, so. Now we're on Trains 2, and I kind of foreshadowed earlier that this was going to be one of the most difficult screens in the game, and that's going to be very quickly apparent when we get over to the second part of it. Just getting through with a good amount of score is awesome. Just getting through alive is great here because it gets really dense really fast. These eyeballs fire a lot of bullets. You can see there's a lot of action already, and those lasers are coming. Don't you worry. Fortunately, hesitate a little bit there and take that hit, but we tech off of it pretty well and go for these train heads, which give us the most points. So gives us a clean transition in the Croco tank here. Same goal, we're going to break all 4 legs, but this time he fires higher up, and they're not breakable bullets, so you have to navigate it a little differently. And unfortunately take a hit before breaking that, but that allows me to get into this cool safe zone here, which makes the rest of the fight pretty chill. We shoot this switch that gives you bonus based on how many bonuses you've picked up in the run, so 2109 was what we got, because we missed 2 bonuses. And then we're heading into Grapefruit again. So this is kind of like the big climactic fight. And I want to start explaining this now because there's a lot here. So this is going to play out more like a Dark Souls fight than it is a shmup fight, because this fight is a very intelligent mech versus mech fight. It's supposed to be a mech versus mech fight, but we're stuck in Vulcan and we're not using the mech against it. So we need to get Grapefruit to do really particular things to keep this fight fast and safe. So we're going to get close to Grapefruit, and what that does is that makes Grapefruit slash her sword at us and fire these sword beams. She'll do that up to 3 times before doing a revenge attack, which we don't want to see. So we're going to grab 3 and immediately get out of range. In the time of that, we need to defeat 4 pylons, because that will make Grapefruit go into this scripted move where she breaks off these pylons and fires lasers at us. That's the best chance to DPS her. We're going to time this phase switch so that she does the beam attack afterwards, which causes it to be longer and gives us more chance to damage. But now here, in phase 2, the swords will bounce off the bottom of the screen like that, meaning that if we let her slash 3 times, it gets really dangerous. So instead, we slash once and let the pylons break to give us a safe path to the side of the screen, and also set up an easy dodge on the blade, and also give her good DPS. So we grabbed sword earlier, and that matters because that changes what attack we get here. The blade beam attack is supposed to be a Phantom Ganon style, like blade tennis duel, but that actually just gives us the most opportunity to dodge and deal damage over drill. And we had a perfect Grapefruit. Not often that fight goes completely perfectly. If you get off cycle, it can go bad really fast on Vulcan, so I was really happy with this. And Grapefruit is kind of why this category exists. When I first got to Grapefruit casually as a player, I was so amazed by how cool the fight was. Like, there's so much you don't get to see because of the manipulation. Like, it's a cool mech versus mech fight. It's so dramatic. And I wanted to see if I could just beat it at all without, like, any power-ups. If I could just bring Vulcan in and just defeat her one-on-one. And that was just a project of mine for a while. I'd start stage 2, 3. I didn't even know rank existed. I didn't know the game's difficulty went up by playing well. I just reset on 2, 3 and would try to do it all in one go without using any power-ups. And that kind of led into this whole passion project existing. So always like to get a good Grapefruit. So this is our final stage, stage 2-4. This section's called Amoebas. It's kind of the calm before the storm. It's normally a scoring segment, but you need melee to break these greens. And they give you more points if you shoot them first and they grow, and then you melee them. And then for the oranges, if you slash them, they break into smaller pieces. And when you shoot them, they give you more points when they're smaller. But instead, all we can do with Vulcan is to try to kill as many of the orange as we can. But beyond that, this is kind of like the final breather. We're about to head into the final boss rush of the game. And it's where the difficulty is going to get really dynamic really quick. Because with Grapefruit was the first true example of the game's expected you to have these power-ups, but now the game has required me to have them. Like, in order to fight Grapefruit at all, you have to bring melee into the fight. So at this point, the balancing is now fully expecting you to have every tool in your toolkit, either back or side, either charge or lock on, or either sword or drill. Which means there's no mercy for us Vulcan players. So we're going to go into Orb Phase of Despair first. These orbs, on any phase that has more than one orb, if you break one and don't break the others quickly enough, she'll respawn more. That can cause you to lose a lot of time, and then things can get out of control really quickly. So this phase kind of feels like disarming a bomb. Oh, and they're really aggressive too. They can be really awkward, and they can create a lot of traps if you move incorrectly because they respond to you. So really careful movement, reacting to how they spawn in, and just trying to kill them very quickly. See, that was moments away from a respawn, which would have been really bad there. Orb 3 is kind of the easiest one. This can be completely deterministic if you just kind of scroll the screen, just like I did. And then we kind of get into the mosh pit of Orb 6, all 6 orbs at the same time. A lot of players you can absorb these orbs like power-up orbs, but you'll take damage. A lot of players will actually absorb all of them at once and only take 1 damage to defeat them all, but with Vulcan, I like having my life, so we just try to do it all at once. That setup there is pretty consistent, but you have to kind of react to which direction a lot of things go in. So final boss time, this is Despair, and as you can see right off the bat, this is not going to be a very normal shmup boss fight. She plays like a Toho boss, and That can be very difficult when we don't have any kind of damage mitigation tools. We get a really nice pattern to start here. By damaging her so much, she'll try to do a revenge attack. It's usually slaps or that Mandela. And then she starts with a really mean attack, drills. So the drills themselves can be bumped off of, those bullets cannot, so those will deal immediate damage. The hands will also deal immediate damage. Everything here is just a bullet. It's gonna hurt. You don't want to get hit by it. There's a lot of variance in this run, and it's really hard to kind of go over everything. This is definitely the hardest attack in the game to dodge, and I'm very excited that I dodged it, because I usually don't. Usually very easy, because there's a lot of variance to the pattern that can be there. You definitely want to do the most damage during those melee attacks when she comes and slaps you. You want to manipulate her and deal the most damage. This move, we want to hug the bottom of the screen here to make them go a certain way. That also lets us get the most Vulcan damage out. And as you can see with the Mandelas, they're very literal. If you thought that dodge was tight, it is tight. But that dodge allows us to get the most damage. And we want to constantly be damaging Despair because the more she gets the attack, the more danger we take. Now, this is my favorite move in the entire game. It's really cool, really dramatic. Pretty difficult to learn how to dodge it first. And then you have to deal with the Shuriken afterwards, and that's really dangerous. With Drill, it was really dangerous. I haven't had a pattern like that in a long time. So on final health bar, she kind of does everything 3 times. 3 melees, and she really likes to spam the 2 sword and drill power-up attacks the most. See, she's already doing another sword. So you saw the first one a few moments ago, and now we're already on a second one. And then right into a normal hand 3, which is really dangerous pattern, but it's really quick during the final health bar, so if you get through the bulk of it, you're okay. One final set of melees, and that's the end of the fight. Psych. It's a Toho fight. Of course there's a last spell, but the last spell is just more of a desperation attack. You can use this opportunity to get a lot of points by hitting her. You can abuse the bottoms of the mandala to get those safe spots like I am here to get as many points as you can off of it. Get a really neat safe spot right here too. And there we go. That's Despair. And we still have a little more of the run left. Like any good shmup, we have an escape final sequence. And that's where all the score is in 2-4. So if you thought scoring was like, okay, gosh, we just have to get through Despair and that's it. No, this is actually where all the score is in 2-4, is in this sequence. And if it goes wrong, you can lose a lot of points. So standard, you want to build up your multiplier here at the beginning and try to carry it as deep as you can. If you're a casual, you would lose your sword power up after this first screen, and thus trying to carry 12.8 is kind of the goal of the game. With Vulcan, we're just holding on to 6.4 as long as we can. Fortunately, do lose it here, but we get it back pretty quickly. Every time this shockwave happens, see, I lost the sword there, you would lose another power up. Want to go for as many overkills as we can here, weaving in very carefully around the bullets. Very good score there. This segment looks pretty easy at first, but then Flydoo start to spawn from the bottom. We got to try to move them around as best as we can because they get pretty aggressive. Good amount of score there. Here you need to get to the bottom to quickly pick up an enemy or else you'll lose multiplier. You're supposed to use like back shot or side shot here, but instead I'm bumping on purpose to keep my multiplier up. Then we get into double squids, which is kind of the diciest part. Definitely sometimes just, if I don't get the quick kill, I definitely expect to take a hit there sometimes. Now we're on the final screen. We want to dodge these billows from below and just kill as many enemies as we can. If you end up, you actually will survive if you lose all of your lives here, but it really cuts your scoring potential on this stage by a lot. So it's really important to try to get through this whole section with lives remaining. And that's that. We are through Vulcan only High Score Showcase. This video had such a strong loop 2 with A ranks on stages 2-1, 2-2, and 2-4 that it ended up being world record despite the pretty unfortunate start on 1-4. Now I was pretty happy to get world record in a marathon setting where I wasn't going to reset after stage 1. B plus is very good. Had 1-4 been a B rank like it normally was, it would have been the first cumulative A rank for Vulcan. So very excited to see that Vulcan's gotten that high that quickly. A couple years ago, this was just a survival category. We were just focused on getting through it the best we can, but with the help of the community and a lot of big pushes from certain players, it's really turned into a high score showcase, and I'm very excited to be able to bring this to GDQ in the future. So that's all from me. ZeroRanger is a very high action showcase. As you can tell, I didn't really have a whole lot of downtime and I had a lot to explain. So this will definitely be very exciting. It's very high risk, as you can see. It's very easy for things to go completely out of control and to lose lives very quickly. So there's a lot of crowd appeal for this run, and I'm really excited to potentially bring it in front of such a large audience. But with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very, very much.